Okay, class, welcome to history. So today we're going to talk about the Lincoln assassination that happened in 1865. So I want you guys to open up your History Here's app, where we will be using the tour of the Lincoln assassination. All right. Now, one of my first questions I have for you guys is, what did Junius Brutus Booth do before moving to America? So what I want you guys to do is when you click on the Lincoln Assassination app, I want you guys to go to the Start Tour button, and then you're going to press the list that pops up on the app, and then it's basically going to run you through the whole tour, which we're going to be going through along with this lesson today. So I want you guys to first click on Tudor Hall, and the first thing I want to ask is, again, what did Junius Brutus Booth do before moving to America? Kind of skim through, then once you get your answer, you can raise your hand once you have the answer.
Is he an actor?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was a well-known actor before he moved to America. And so if you're wondering who Junius Brutus Booth is, he is the father of, okay, so he is the father of John Wilkes Booth. So John Wilkes was the person that assassinated Abraham Lincoln in 1865. So today we're gonna go over the background of John Booth and basically where all of this hatred stemmed from. So first going, John Booth grew up basically in the shadow of his older brother, Edward Booth, who was a well-known actor in America as well in the mid-19th century. So basically, before going through all this, he became an actor himself. So by starting that off, he went on tours up north throughout New York City, throughout Chicago, throughout Detroit, and just the big cities in America, basically trying to get his name known, to try to come out of his own and be himself. So as he was going through all this, he had built up a lot of hatred, again, stemming through all of the battles he had, trying to live up to his brother's expectations and his father's expectations. So around the mid-1860s, John Booth began to tour more down south as the Civil War was going on, and throughout this war, again, it was a big hatred between the South, who were the Confederate nation, against the Union nation, who was led by Abraham Lincoln, who was obviously the commander-in-chief, and then Ulysses Grant was the general of that area. So I want you guys to go back to the tour and then find Lincoln's second inauguration. Have you guys found that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Lincoln's second inauguration was sort of the buildup of John Booth's plan to assassinate Lincoln, as you could say. John Booth, or Lincoln's second inauguration started when basically the Union's victory was about to be prominent. So the Union were on the edge of winning the war, and so basically Abraham Lincoln was given a speech talking about how the Civil War was a punishment for the nation's actions of having slaves. So Abraham Lincoln had this speech, and John Booth was in the crowd, and he had received a ticket from his secret wife. And so basically John Booth made a statement talking about how he had the right opportunity right then and there, being at this big inauguration, which was known as one of the best speeches of an inauguration in America. John Booth made a statement saying this was my chance to get rid of Lincoln, and this was my chance to save the nation from what he thought was terrorizing the nation. He saw Lincoln as the devil, which he was not. He said, he cut out the slave trades. So as this went on, Booth started making plans to first kidnap Abraham Lincoln. So I want you guys to go to the I want you guys to go to Lincoln's cottage. Okay, so this part of the tour talks about basically John Booth's whole plan and what he had scoped out as far as what he was going to do. So Abraham Lincoln had a plan to go to a hospital to watch a play. I believe this was in, I know this was March 17th. It doesn't talk about the city, but it basically he went to go watch this play. So John Booth and his pretty much posse or crowd that was with him to try to kidnap Lincoln were set out in the streets at night. So they were expecting Lincoln and his horses to come through the streets, and by then they were going to kidnap them. But Lincoln made the plan to last minute backtrack and basically he went to a different event, and that ended up changing John Booth's whole plan of kidnapping Lincoln. So after that, time went on and things started to really turn up, and where the Union finally got their victory. All of the generals down in the Confederate, they all surrendered, and the Union got the victory. So once that happened, it became apparent to John Booth that the only way he was going to be able to fully get rid of Lincoln was by assassination. So him and his group, which consisted of George Acerot, Louis Powell, and other men, they got together and they came up with plans to basically take out the 4 top people in the government that was being represented with the Union. So that consisted of, again, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses Grant, the Vice President Andrew Johnson, and then the Secretary of State. So around, what was it? So by May 1865, May 9th, 1865 to be exact, they went to they traveled to the place where the play was being held at, that Lincoln was watching, and John Booth ended up coming into the pit, which Lincoln's private pit, where he then shot him in the head with his gun. And so Lincoln was taken out, chaos occurred, and so basically everyone went crazy. John Booth leaped away from the pit and ended up breaking his leg. And so him and his, basically the person that was holding onto his horse outside of the venue in which the event was occurring, they left Washington, D.C. on a 12-day trip to Virginia, where John Booth ended up being found in a farmhouse. So as far as the other 3 people that were involved in the case, one of them tried to assassinate Seward in his own house, or in his hotel. Seward in his house when he was laying in bed. He had just broken his jaw. So he fought through the front and fought through the men and got to Seward. Seward was laying in his bed. He had a knife in his hand and basically just tried to stab Seward as much as he could. But Seward had a neck brace on, so it was like blocking a lot of the knife shots. So he ended up surviving the fight, and so then Louis Powell, he ended up getting arrested for that. And then on another case, George Azardot ended up trying to come for the Vice President Andrew Johnson, who was in the hotel, but he ended up being too scared to do anything, so he ended up getting drunk in the bar, which was right below Andrew Johnson's hotel room, and basically went out of the whole situation. So as the Lincoln assassination went on, the nation was, again, they were in crisis, especially the Union states in particular. They were in panic mode. Many people, it was about an estimate about 1.5 million people were lined up in the train tracks as Lincoln's motorcade came along the train tracks. People were viewing his body, and it was a big grief. And even a lot of the generals in the South, including Lee, he was against John Booth's whole plan of assassinating Lincoln. So now, as far as John Booth and what he had planned for his escape plan was to, which he succeeded for most of the time that he was escaping. He went through the South. He went through, went through Pennsylvania. He went through all the states and then went to Virginia. He ended up meeting a family where they, at this time, the Confederate States, they had cut off all communication lines, so no one in the South knew that even Lincoln was assassinated 12 days after the assassination happened. No one even knew, or most people in rural areas did not know. So John Booth found someone in a rural house and basically lived with them. They took care of him, and they started to catch on a little bit. But once they did find out that Lincoln had been assassinated and they found out who the person was, they still didn't know the actual face of John Booth, so he was still living with them. So about a day later, once they found out, John Booth asked them how to get to Mexico. So his ultimate goal was to get to Mexico so that he would escape the U.S. government, who was, man searching him, and they were really trying to find that man. So, but after a day of finding out that Lincoln had been assassinated, John Booth basically got arrested at the farmhouse that he was in, him and his company, and John Booth was then killed on the spot because the people that were arresting him felt as though he was being a threat to them. So overall, John Booth did not make, or his assassination was a success, but his aftermath, or what he was trying to account to, did not occur. Again, his goal of the assassination was for the Confederate States to make a comeback as they were again down by the Union. But fortunately, that didn't happen. Unfortunately for John Booth, that didn't happen, and he just ended up dying. And so that's basically Lincoln assassination in a nutshell. There was a lot more political aspects into the whole ordeal, as far as the North versus South. But again, when it came down to the actual nation, the nation ended up coming together after the assassination, and the law that passed for the slaveries to be free, which was the Immigration Act, or the Civil Rights Act of 1865, was passed after Lincoln's assassination, that allowed the slaves to be free and to venture out to northern states and try to find job opportunities. And that all really occurred after this assassination. It really brought the nation together, and for a little bit at least. And then so that kind of calmed down the racial tension for a while, until again the early 20th century, things started to really pick up, but we'll talk more about that in our next lesson. So yeah, that's all we have about for Lincoln assassination right now for a 20-minute lesson. Any questions from you guys that you might have?